All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump in to our lecture content for this evening, and we're kind of going back to the mental, emotional, cognitive component of the class, and right thinking is our topic. And this is really important because if we think of things in the wrong way, is that going to get us to the right destination? Not so much. So there was some interesting research that was done, and I haven't actually dug into how they did this, but I read the summary of it, and they were, I think it was just based off of interviews with survivors of prisoners of war. And if my memory serves me correctly, I think it was the Vietnam War. And you know, there were quite a few prisoners of war, some of them for years. And what they were looking for was there some characteristic that distinguished the survivors from the people that didn't survive? And they were looking at, were they optimists versus pessimists, and you know, what was going to be the key. And what they found is that, you know, the pessimists were the people who, when they were caught, they're like, oh, I'm going to die in here, this is horrible, this is the worst thing ever, and sure enough, they died. And then what they figured out was that the next ones to die soon after that were the optimists, the ones who were taken prisoner and thought, oh, it won't be long, I'll be home by Christmas and everything's going to work out fine, but they weren't, and then they were just crushed by the reality and they ended up dying. The ones who survived generally were the ones who were more realistic. In other words, they realized this is a horrible situation, but I'm going to find a way to survive somehow. I don't know how long I'm going to be here, but I'm going to look for opportunities. Okay, and we see this over and over again in different research in different ways, that it's not as much the external circumstances, it's more how we relate to them. And one of the most important things is to actually relate to the truth, okay, or we might call it reality, okay? So sometimes people that are pessimistic, they have a distorted view of reality, and also sometimes optimists. We call them optimists, but sometimes they have a distorted view of reality also. And so we want to start learning to tell ourselves the truth about our situation. And usually the truth is somewhere in between those two extremes. And most people, it turns out, tend to gravitate to one way of looking at the world or the other, kind of either being very pessimistic or very optimistic. And it's hard to stay, you might call it the narrow way, the narrow path of being realistic. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. And to do that, we have in the handout 10 different cognitive distortions. So these are things that have been described by psychologists over the years. And what they describe is things that distort our perception of reality. And I see some of you are wearing glasses. Have you ever had a situation where you were wearing glasses and it seemed like the world was kind of foggy and out of focus, and then eventually you realized your glasses were dirty and fogged up and you had to clean your glasses? Has that ever happened to you? Yeah. So we know that the lenses, sometimes they help us to see better, but sometimes they can cause a distortion. And of course, they sell glasses for that purpose, right? The different colors, and some of them are wavy and make things look funny, and it's kind of, you know, it's fun to play around with those things sometimes. But what if your mind had one of those silly glasses that made everything distorted, but you didn't even realize it. Could that be a problem? It might be. It might be. So these are examples, and I'm not going to go into great depth because there's basic descriptions here, and I'll let you read those. And if you want to read more about those, a quick Google search will get you into all sorts of in-depth discussions and books and all that. But just a few of them. These are pretty common. All or nothing thinking. We talked about that one the other night with the chocolate cake, didn't we? Like, oh, I blew my diet already. I might as well just go ahead and eat the whole thing. It's like, well, that's a cognitive distortion, right? It's not really true that just because you ate one piece, you might as well eat the whole piece, the whole thing. Overgeneralization. This is something, I feel like this is a stereotype about teenagers, but it probably applies to a lot of adults too. You know, the example here is, you know, perhaps a young man might get turned down by asking a girl for a date. And she said no. He gets turned down once or twice, and he's just like, oh, I'm never going to find a girlfriend. Girls just don't like me. It's like, wait, there's like 3 billion girls in this world, and you ask 3 of them that don't like you, and so now you're going to say none of them like you? Like, that's overgeneralizing, yes. Isn't it? It is. It's really broad. And we do things like that. Disqualifying the positive. Now this one, and it could work the other way too. So a lot of these are written from the perspective of someone who's dealing with depression and anxiety, because that's what therapists often deal with. People that are overly optimistic don't usually end up in therapy. They just end up doing stupid stuff and getting themselves hurt. But you could disqualify the negative, and that's the thing that gets pilots killed if they don't pay attention to the negative, right? But disqualifying the positive. You know, I did this myself one time a few years ago. I opened my private practice. It had been a dream of mine for a long time. I had worked for several different organizations. I finally opened my private practice. I rented some room in a fitness center, which is perfect for my style of practice. And we advertised to the community, grand opening. We had some healthy food there, and you know, friends and family, and a meet and greet for everybody. And it was a really nice event. My mother drove probably almost 5 hours to come to it. Wow. Brought me a plant and everything. She said, "Oh, you are such a good doctor. I'm so proud of you. You're going to be a wonderful help for all of these people." And my thought was, yeah, that's just my mom. Of course she's going to say that. That was disqualifying the positive. Disqualified because it's just my mom. Well, doesn't my mom matter for something? Yeah, actually she does. She matters at least as much as all the other people, and maybe a little bit more for me, right?
She drove 5 hours.
But yeah, she drove farther than anybody else to come to the grand opening. Most of the other people is 5 minutes across town, you know. So the reason we're going through this is I want you over the coming days to start paying attention. Like, go through this list a few times and see if you can catch yourself using any of these cognitive distortions. And then we're going to think about, once you do that, how can you reframe those thoughts to be more correct? Okay, not just positive, but actually telling yourself the truth. Okay, jumping to conclusions. Do I need to say more about that? Pastor Kelly even mentioned that in his sermon. It's the only exercise some people get, is jumping to conclusions. Like, no. We're going to do real exercise in this class. We don't need jumping to conclusions, okay? Magnification or minimization, emotional reasoning. This is a big one that people, it's so insidious that people do this and they don't even realize that they're doing it. And that is, just because you feel a certain way, that doesn't make it reality. And in fact, our entire culture now has it. accepted this cognitive distortion as if it's true. That just because you feel a certain way, that makes it reality. And that's not true. You can feel all sorts of ways that has nothing to do with reality. And now I'm not saying that feelings and emotions are not important. They're very important. And if you have feelings or emotions about something, those are important to pay attention to, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's really reflecting reality, right? So, like this one, the example, I feel stupid, and therefore that means I'm stupid. Like, well, that's not necessarily the case, okay? A lot of times people feel stupid because they made a dumb mistake. And then the next one is should statements. Focusing on how you feel like things should be instead of the reality of the way they are. Again, I'll use myself as an example. I kind of combine these two together, feeling stupid and should statements. So I was commuting for work one time, and my son, one of my boys, was looking for a new pickup truck. Actually, used one, because new ones are insanely expensive. So good used trucks, right? And so I was driving down the freeway, and I saw a dealership on the side, and they had a couple of trucks there. I thought, oh, that looks like what my son's interested in. So I took the next exit, whipped around in there, and it happened that my wife and a couple of my kids were with me. We're in the van, and so we pulled in there and parked, and I got on my phone and called my son to, ask him questions or be able to talk to him as I was looking at these vehicles. And I got out of the vehicle, and I was shutting the door, and I looked around, and I saw that there were some scruffy people loitering around. And so I thought, I'm going to lock the door. But the problem was the door was already going shut. I thought, well, I'm just going to open the door and lock it. But there was already too much force, and guess what got stuck in the door? My thumb. Now, to make this even worse, well, this gets into some of the other things, but in the 3 months before that, I had 3 patients that slammed their fingers in a car door. And you know what I thought? How stupid can you be? Like, one girl even locked her keys inside the car and shut the door on her finger, and she could not get her finger out because it was jammed in there, and her keys were inside the door, and the door was locked. And so she just had to scream until the neighbor heard her and went in her house and got other keys and came and unlocked it for her. I was like, how dumb can you be, really? Like, you're an adult. I didn't say that to her, okay, but I was, you know what I'm talking about. You think things, but I do have a filter that works, most of the time, fairly good most of the time. But this time it was me. I was like, oh, and I did pull my thumb out, so it didn't actually get, stuck in there. But man, some of you all know that feeling of like it smashed really good, and I was just thinking, oh man, how stupid! Like I was saying the same thing about myself that I said about other people. Okay, so at least I was being consistent. Okay, even if that's not nice or not really true. And then my next thought was, oh, man, could I just have a do-over? You ever thought that? If I could just go back 5 seconds and redo that. And I was thinking that all night as my thumb was throbbing, I couldn't sleep, it swelled up. It was like, and now I'm doing the doctor thing, like, did I break it? It's like, oh, I can't tell. Anyway, it didn't break, but it took 6 months before it was back to normal, and I could play the guitar again and stuff like that.
So
anyway.
Did your son get the pickup?
No, he didn't. Anyway, so that was kind of emotional reasoning and should statements merged into one with that big cognitive distortion. In reality, I just need to realize, hey, people make mistakes, and I'm one of the people, and I make mistakes, and it just happens. And you don't get do-overs, you just have to roll with it and like get over it and move on. Instead of wasting mental energy wishing you could do it over when in reality you can't. Right? So you follow me there? All right. Labeling and mislabeling and personalization. So this is an interesting one, personalization. Sometimes we take things really personal when they're not. The example here is about a parent and a child in school not doing well in school. Like, is that the parent's fault? Well, sometimes it is, but not necessarily. Sometimes kids just goof off, or maybe the teacher goofed off and didn't teach what they were supposed to. Like, there could be a lot of reasons, okay? So to automatically assume that it's personal is probably not a good thing, right? So those are just illustrations. Take time to read over that again a couple of times in the next few days and see if you can start. So this is one of the themes, thinking about what you're thinking about how you make decisions. Are they based on emotion or your physical desires, or are they based on your thoughts and your reasoning process, or does it flip-flop sometimes depending on what it is? Some people are really good about making rational decisions with their finances, but they're horrible about making rational decisions about what they eat, and vice versa. And like all sorts of different ways it can be mixed up. So start thinking about that. How are you making decisions? And this is the second big category of, okay, what areas do I have some sort of cognitive distortion in the way that I'm thinking about things? I had a situation happen to me just recently where I had to kind of check myself a little bit. It was a situation where something didn't happen the way it was supposed to. Somebody didn't treat me right. And it triggered some memories that I had about another person in a similar position that had not treated me right over a long period of time. And I had to kind of check myself and say, okay, this person is not that person. So I'm not going to take what I know from that situation and put it on this person. It's a separate thing. And we'll just deal with this for what it is right now and not allow, you understand what I'm saying? So, because that I don't know what, maybe that would have been personalization or something like that. I don't know. But you understand what I'm saying? So start analyzing the thoughts that you have and looking for distortions. And when you have glasses, if something doesn't look right, like you clean your glasses, you get your other pair of glasses, maybe you go see the eye doctor and get a new prescription or have them check your eyes. So we need to do that with our way of thinking sometimes. And so sometimes it's good to have your accountability partner there to kind of check your perceptions, or a coach, a life coach or a fitness coach, or sometimes even a therapist. If we have a lot of distortions and we have trouble sorting out reality from our own stuff, sometimes that's one thing a therapist is for. So, all right. Now on page 5, as we recognize reality, we do, however, want to choose to focus on the positive, okay, without denying the challenges or the negative, right? So, for example, every one of us here, we could think about some challenges that we have, some physical limitations, something that could be holding us back, or we can think about the fact that we were all able to actually be here. And even, you mind if I pick on you just a little bit? I'm not picking on you,
I'm very thankful.
Yeah, so Barb is an obvious example. It would be really easy for you to make excuses and say, oh, I can't go because I had this problem, this problem, this problem. But she's here. She decided to look in the positive, like, look, I have a wheelchair, I have a scooter, I can actually walk however far you can walk now, and start focusing on the positive. That doesn't deny the reality that there's still challenges, but by focusing on the positive, then that gets you moving more in a positive direction. And yeah, life, I mean, you can go through life and there's horrible stuff everywhere. And if you choose to focus on it, life can be really horrible. But there's really good stuff everywhere too. And I remember reading the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Anybody else ever read that book? Mm-hmm. Yes. Only one of you? Whoa. 2 of you have read this book. So, everybody should read this book, I think.
Man's Search for Meaning?
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian Jew, medical doctor who was a psychiatrist, who was thrown into Auschwitz by the Germans.
What was his name?
Viktor Frankl. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a graded part of this class, but just for your own life enrichment, it's worth reading. So he wrote the book kind of as a psychiatrist self-analyzing himself and everybody else in the concentration camps. And then, so he tells this story, and then the second half of the book is like from a psychiatrist's perspective of how to use those lessons in analyzing people and all that, which maybe is not as relevant, but the story is amazing. And he tells in there the story. So he's in a German concentration camp. He's separated from his family. As far as he knows, they're all dead. People around him are dying, starving to death. It's wintertime, and they are put on a work detail. They're out to build a railroad track in the freezing winter in Germany. It's literally frozen, and they hardly had any clothes, and they hardly had any food. And he saw a little bird that was scratching in the snow in the sunlight as the morning light was filtering through the clouds. And he describes how he just stopped and stared at the beauty of this little bird and the sunlight, and how it totally transformed his perspective on life. And he said, even in the midst of all that horror, there's little bits of beauty. Okay? So I think that's true for all of us. Whatever is going on in our life, whatever challenges brought us to this point, there's beauty. And we know that as Christians, that God says He'll never leave us, forsake us, that He's always with us, and that He'll bring something good even out of the worst situations. And so it's good to remind ourselves about that. So that's the first thing here. Choose to focus on the positive. That doesn't deny the reality of negativity and bad things in the world, but focus on the good. Second thing, all of your excuses are lies. I know that might sound a little harsh, but it's true. All of your excuses are just lies that you tell yourself to try to justify why you're not doing what you know you should do. That's why we call it an excuse. Right? So I've had people tell me that they can't walk when it's raining. You understand that's kind of silly. Like, just because it's raining doesn't mean you can't walk. Like, you can't walk if you're quadriplegic. You can't walk if you don't have legs. You can't walk, if you had a stroke and your leg doesn't work. But if you can walk, you can still walk when it's raining. Like, maybe you need to get a raincoat. Maybe you need an umbrella. Maybe you need to find some place indoors. But just to say, I can't walk because it's raining, that's an outright lie that you tell yourself to excuse yourself from doing something that's uncomfortable. So don't do that. Tell yourself the truth. Say, hey, it's raining. I don't really want to walk in the rain, but I'm going to do it anyway. And maybe I'll put on a raincoat, and maybe I won't, because it's just water. You're not really made out of sugar and spice. Any questions about that? Don't make excuses. You can, you've probably seen this before, you've heard this before. You can make excuses, or you can get results. What do you want? If you want results, instead of making excuses, then you have to change the attitude to say, instead of saying, So I have this all the time. People tell me, well, I can't exercise because I have a bad knee. Okay, there's literally thousands of exercises you can do that don't involve your bad knee. Like, well, but I have a bad shoulder too. All right, well, that narrows it down to, hundreds of exercise options instead of thousands maybe, or maybe it's only thousands instead of millions. I don't know, I haven't counted them all, but there's still a lot. So instead of thinking of all the things you can't do, think about, I'm not going to name any names, but there have been some people that have lived in my house in the last 30 years. And, sometimes you ask somebody to do something, they're like, oh, they're sighing, it's so hard. Well, what if that person wanted to do that same thing? You think they would find a way? Absolutely. On a different day with a different attitude, they do much harder things if they want to, right? So it's about attitude. So instead of saying, I can't exercise because I have this, this, and this, and so I'm just going to sit here and eat bonbons, think, I'm going to exercise because it's what's best for my body. Now, I have some challenges, so how can I find the exercise I can do that can work around the challenges I have, or maybe even help me improve some of those areas of challenge? And do I need to get some help? Can I figure this out on my own? What can I do? Like, in reality, if you just lay in bed and roll back and forth, that's exercise for some people, and that's most people can do at least that, but they don't, because they can't exercise, because they got whatever. So stop making excuses. Start thinking about what you can do and what you want to achieve, and find the path. If there's obstacles in the way, one of my favorite authors, you may have heard of her, Ellen White. She wrote a lot of books. 100 years ago, she said, turn those obstacles into stepping stones to help you achieve your goals. And I think that's good advice. And then reframe your thoughts. Okay, so this is specifically about those negative, distorted thoughts. So imagine that a thought comes into your brain, wherever it comes from. We're not going to get into that right now, but the thought comes to your mind about something. I suggest that you have a checkpoint for all thoughts that come into your mind. My son just went into Canada, and they have a little border, I don't know what they call it in Canada. I don't know if they call it border patrol or something, but anyway, they have a little check station you have to go through. Say, what's your business here? Let me see your passport. Are you carrying any weapons? You have this, you have that. All these questions they have to answer if they want to get in. So have the same thing for thoughts coming into your mind. Stop the thought and interrogate it. Say, hey, what are you carrying? Are you a positive thought or a negative thought? Are you actually true? And think, check for ID. Make sure, is there some way you can identify this thought as being true? Right? So stop the thought, analyze it, and if you find out that it's not true or if it's negative, then either send it away or change it in some way. Right? So this is what we call reframing. So if the thought comes to your mind, I can't exercise, or I just can't stop eating these Oreos because they're so yummy, or whatever.
I know someone who did just last week.
Did you know? Oh, we'll save that for later. I was going to get off on a tangent there, but okay. So take that thought and change it into something true. This is like elementary school writing assignments, right? Take this sentence and change one or two words to make it a complete sentence, or make it a true sentence or true statement, right? So you can do that. I can't exercise. You could say, oh, you almost got it right. Just take off that NT on the end, and it's, I can exercise. Boom. Okay, I'll welcome that thought. Or maybe you could say, well, I'm having a challenge with exercise right now because of these things. In spite of that, I'm going to find a way to still achieve my goals. So we could go into much more detail on reframing, but just first thing is start identifying the reality that thoughts are coming in, analyze them to see if there's any distortions, and then see how you can adjust it to actually be true, okay? And then lastly here, I want to talk about these automatic reactions. And I have colors to choose from. Okay. So we're gonna look at this. So often we have events that happen. Sometimes we call this a trigger or an event. And then we have a response. Right? And how many times have we said to ourselves, well, I couldn't help doing this, or feeling this, or thinking this, because this happened. I couldn't help getting mad at him because he said something mean to me. Right? Well, he hit me first. Boom. I don't know. Probably all you girls don't understand that. Maybe you do, if you have brothers. Like, I don't know. Boys and girls really are different. I don't know. Anyway, we have this something happens and we have a reaction, and we often think that it's an automatic reaction. But it's not quite automatic, because there's actually in between here and here several things. So you see, there's our feelings, right? Okay, so he said something mean to me that hurt my feelings, and I got angry, so that's why I hit him back. But even that is not quite the full story, because in between here we have perception and we have beliefs. So for example, has anyone ever watched a football game? Anybody played in a football game? Some of you have? Yeah. So what happens in a football game? People tackle each other, right? You could be running down the field, the little ball, and some guy comes and grabs you and slams you on the ground. And what's the response? Well, you hop back up, everybody lines up, and they go again, right? It's part of the game. So the perception is we're playing a game. The belief is that this is a normal part of the game. The feelings are like, oh, I didn't really like that. I'm going to run faster next time. And the response is, no, just continue on with the game. Okay, so this is the triggering event is getting tackled. Now, what if that same person was walking down the sidewalk, let's see, outside of Baguette over here, the restaurant, and somebody just runs out of the restaurant and tackles them and slams them on the ground. Same exact event. What's the response going to be? Probably a little bit different. It's like somebody called the cops. Like, this guy just assaulted me, and there might be a fight, or there maybe, I don't know, something's, but it's not going to be the same for sure, because the perception is that this is an assault. I believe that this person is trying to hurt me, and now I feel anger about it, even though it's the exact same event that happened on the football field, in which my feeling was, hey, you know, I made it 20 yards on that play, so that was pretty good. But now it's like, oh. So you see what I mean about the trigger and the response is mediated by all this other stuff, our perception. So this is why our perceptions are so important. So we want to make sure our perceptions are not distorted. We want to check our beliefs, make sure they're correct. And then our feelings, well, we have to work with our feelings sometimes. But a lot of times, if our perceptions and our beliefs are in line, our feelings are going to line up too. So, all right. So to our situation in life, when we're dealing with our health and health behavior change and habits and eating and all these things, you know, if your perception is, oh, there's the dessert table, that's the trigger, and you just go and load up with everything. Like, has that ever happened? For some of us, it has. Now we got to start thinking about what's the perception? Like, oh, that's really good. The belief is, I deserve it. It'll make me feel good. And the feelings are, oh, a little endorphin rush, right? What if the perception is like, that's mostly fake food? It's kind of shallow, and I believe it's actually going to mess with my blood sugar and make me feel horrible. And my feelings are like, oh, I don't want to live this way anymore. Then what's the response going to be? Maybe I'll pass. Right? Same trigger, different response, because the perception, the belief, and the feelings are different in between. So we need to start purposely, especially when we're talking about our actions that impact our health, separating the trigger from the response and thinking about what's happening in between there and making sure that we get that part right. And then, you know, when we got that right, it's okay to let it be automatic again. Automatic in quotes, right? Because it's not really automatic, just like driving a car, a stick shift. Okay? And then finally, I'm going to talk about 3 important, I would call these spiritual things or mental health concepts. Love, compassion, and forgiveness. So these are things that we all probably experience in relation to other people, right? Everybody here has somebody else in their life that they love. Is that right? Somebody, a spouse, a friend, a child, a parent. So what is love? It's a principle of action, and it's a feeling. It's both. Compassion. I want to say just a word about the difference between sympathy and compassion. Compassion, the Bible says that Jesus had compassion. I don't remember saying that he had sympathy, although, you know, the words they're based off of similar root words, and sometimes we use them interchangeably, but for the purpose of our discussion, I want to suggest that, you know, what if you saw somebody who was a drunk person who couldn't walk, they were staggering around, and they tripped and fell in the road, and the car ran over their leg and broke it, and you just had sympathy for them. You might go over there and sit down next to them and say, oh, that's horrible. Here, let me put my coat over you, and here's a little pillow for your head, and I'll stay here with you until help arrives. And, oh, this is so horrible that people have treated you this way. I mean, that would be expressing sympathy, but then what would happen? You might get run over too, laying there in the road with a drunk person. Compassion might include all of the same sort of non-judgmental reaction that sympathy would, but it also includes the desire to help make things better. So compassion, it may be, let's get you out of the road, right? And that might even hurt a little bit, moving somebody with a broken leg, but we got to get them out of the road so they're not getting run over. And then maybe we'll call for help, and we'll stay there with that person. And So compassion is that sort of non-judgmental understanding with respect and a desire to make things better. And then forgiveness. I think I'm going to talk about this more later, so I won't go into it tonight. You can read that if you like. I want to shorten up here so we can get to our groups. But forgiveness, for right now, we'll just say forgiveness is important. And we need to forgive other people. And sometimes we need to forgive ourselves. So if you've made mistakes and you've done things that you wish you hadn't done, instead of clinging on to the should statements, like it should be different, just choose to exercise forgiveness and forgive yourself and move on. And we'll talk more about how to do that. So that's what I want to leave you with that tonight. In this process, as you're looking for ways to improve your health, you're going to find out there's things that should have been done different, or could have been done different, or there were mistakes and all that stuff. Choose to accept God's love for you and His compassion for you, and God forgives you. And so choose to accept that and allow yourself to agree with God and to also have love and compassion and forgiveness for yourself and for other people.